Golden Knowledge Bite 1. Why do you need to capture knowledge? Professional development activities are used by business and community engagement practitioners to fill gaps in knowledge and skills. These activities can include attendance on a course, going to a conference, reading a trade magazine or book, watching a video, or undertaking a secondment. In the Golden Knowledge Bite series, we'll be focusing on secondments and learning what BCE practitioners wanted to achieve from their industrial experiences and how this new knowledge was transferred to peers, learners and their organisation, and what the impact was. The first of our videos looks at why you need to capture knowledge, reviewing the planning process to ensure the right knowledge is captured and used effectively. When did you realise you needed to update your knowledge?
I started to worry that I was losing track of what was happening out there in the real world. And of course I'm dealing with day release students who are out there in the real world, and there's no good making a statement that they know is incorrect, because that devalues the entire programme. So my need has always been is to get back into industry in some way. I've always done day trips, taken students out, or even gone on my own, and that gives me an insight. And to go in for longer is also an area that I've always asked to do.
I think that's easily brought out by the fact that the changing world that we all live in today, especially within the skills workforce, where we need to compete on an international stage as well as a national stage and make sure our industry's cutting edge. Any new and young people who are put through have to understand that all industry moves on. And as we're moving on the world stage, I need to keep up to date with what's happening in industry. Some of that's quite quick moving. Let's say, for example, automation. Some of it's quite slow. It might be advances in chemistry and microbiology, which have been very traditional, been there for years. But either way, new techniques come to the front.
My area of expertise is in knowledge management within the construction sector. By that I mean construction projects require a lot of knowledge and expertise to bring them to fruition. So the idea that you can call on the expertise of other teams and networks to actually help you accomplish your end product is very, very important. And we have different companies doing it in many different ways. So what I set about doing is to actually capturing how best to transfer that knowledge from one team to another and figure out exactly how they were doing this and what was working and what wasn't working so well.
My motivation was the increasing need of vehicle diagnostics nowadays. They tend to be quite popular. Now most of the cars nowadays have become computer controlled. They're a lot different to what they were last time, in the years ago. So there's obviously a clear need to be in touch or up to date with the latest diagnostic kit. So my area was basically engine diagnostics, which is an area that I worked in industry as well.
Motivating myself with my current CPD was essential, really. I'm course leader for Business Improvement Techniques at Northampton College. To deliver that to the new National Skills Academy standard, I had to undertake the package that they went through with their CPD. That linked into a very good exercise where I was based in Toyota for about 3 weeks, working on improvement projects. That knowledge then was transferable to industry, in that industry needed trainers to be able to be confident, competent and delivering the qualifications on site. So hence the CPD was essential for myself personally.
How was the CPD requirement identified?
I got involved in this particular area of research, and obviously I'm not the first person to have worked in this area, so I was very keen to actually go to other countries to find out how large international companies had coped with this problem before. So for me it was actually seeking out who these people were who had so-called best practice in this area and trying to learn from them to see how I could bring that back into the UK construction environment.
Because I've had close liaison with the industry in the area, when I actually wrote the foundation degree that I teach, so I wrote it specifically for those skills. And I'm quite new to teaching. I've only been teaching for 5 or 6 years. Prior to that I was working in industry and academia, So I was able to know where, from going and talking with people in the industry, I was able to know the areas that where my knowledge was a bit thin and a bit patchy. So they were able to help me to fill those gaps.
And I found that going back into a company, a factory, was proving to me that I hadn't been left behind, that my knowledge was still up to date enough, that on the basics, the atmosphere, the way things were run, the logistics were not really different. But it's also highly stimulating to see all the new technologies, as I said earlier, the control technologies that I had learnt about years ago. I've seen more and more and read about more and more, but to see it in action, that really, really was very, very stimulating, fascinating to watch.
The industry is a very dynamic one. Things are changing now and again. So my needs are to basically keep up to date, keep in touch with the industry.
Over the last 18 months, we've been working closely with our parent industry, and the specialist nature of this college is its dairy nature. So working with some of the top dairies in the UK. And one of the things they recognised that we were short of within our current setup, or our old setup, was the fact that process automation, things like robotics, lean manufacture techniques were absent from our curriculum, and therefore we needed to go and find out. And the way of finding out really is what's happening in some of our modern dairies.
What did you want to achieve in the way of knowledge captured?
I was trying to find out what other people out there were doing. We have two sort of distinct parts of construction. We have the academic environment and we have those in industry. And I was trying to link those two together to make sure that, you know, academia was doing things that industry would accept. So from that perspective, I wanted to go out and find out from large organizations exactly what they were doing and what their issues were. And particularly within the area of knowledge management, a lot of people are questioning why they should do it. So I was looking for examples as to where good practice in knowledge management had brought the company rewards. So it was capturing that and trying to explain to UK companies that these are the potential benefits you can get from investing in knowledge management.
On a broad scale idea really, because initially not knowing what the industry was already moving towards on process automation and advances in techniques and technology within the dairy industry. So initially a broad range of subjects, but since then it's been more tied down to basically the automation of process lines and robotics associated with that. But still keeping an eye on some of the technologies we've discussed in class there about emulsifiers and some of the modern techniques that have been brought on board.
To learn about single crystal growth. As I say, I knew the theory, I'd seen the pictures, but I never really understood how they could control from molten metal to the solid part.
Yes, there are specific pieces of equipment here that I really wasn't familiar with, and although I could teach the theory and I know the techniques broadly, the actual specifics of how they work in industry was really quite new to me. So I was able to identify with Abbott Diagnostics areas where they were able to place me to help me with that. One of the weeks I spent at Abbott, I spent in the fermentation division. And I was able to see their fermenters in action, and they are very similar to the ones that we have here. They're just 5 litre fermenters where they grow up batches of organisms which produce a product which can be isolated for use in diagnostic kits.
How was the knowledge captured?
I worked in 3 different areas. I worked in research and development to begin with. I then worked in fermentation, and then I went to monoclonal antibodies, so 1 week spent in each department. The people there were really helpful and friendly, so any questions that I had about the various techniques, they were really willing and able to answer all my questions. So it was really a good experience for me to be able to ask those questions and get the replies and be able to relate it back to the things that I want to teach when I come back into the centre here.
When I was in Canada, I used contacts within a department there. I have close working relationships with some of my colleagues there, and they in turn have very close working relationships with some of the largest Canadian oil and gas companies and construction companies. So I basically exploited their contacts to find out from these companies what they were doing. And I did the same thing in the United States of America, again using an academic contact with lots of contacts with industry, very large, well-known names, to actually gain access to these companies to find out what they were doing. So it's basically recording these practices and playing it back to UK companies, saying this is what's happening out there.